Good morning, everyone. My name is Nolo. It's great to be with you. It is at a special time, obviously celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, and especially agriculture, conservation. I am very excited to go through today's program. I want to thank the opening remarks from Undersecretary as well as Associate Chief. These are great partners, and I thank you for taking the time to be here. Also want to thank the attendees that are here. It's an important time, so we're really excited about this work. I want to start with setting up the context of America's agriculture, specifically looking at it from the Hispanic perspective. So from the beginning of our work at mano-Y-ola, we have focused on the data collection analysis and developing data-driven decisions, specifically in the area of outreach. How do we better plan, implement, and evaluate the outreach? So it's a combination, obviously, of secondary data and primary data, making decisions based on hard data instead of just intuition, observation, guesswork, or even in cases where you have a lot of experience, not necessarily relying on that past experience alone. Things change. So I think the quality of data, the value of data is what we have focus on, and always in this mindset of trust but verify. My colleague Maya is going to share some data sources. Among these, she'll be sharing data from the agricultural census, and which is, as you know, a complete count of the U.S. is, farms, ranchers, and people who operate these farms, including Hispanics. And we're going to focus on that. But there will be some other data sources. I just want to stress why this is important, and that is that we obviously measure small plots of land as well as big size land. They count anything $1,000 of value of sales on products that are raised and sold, in terms of animals, in terms of vegetables. It could be rural, it could be urban. The reason why I stress this is because every 5 years, according to the USDA, this data is the voice, the future, and the opportunities of farmers. So being included, being represented, and highlighting this data specifically for underserved minorities is an important part of the work that we need to continue to do. So look at this from what it is that opportunity for us to be included, to have a voice, and to help the policy and the decision makers do programs, create services that address the real needs of folks. After Maya presents, I'm going to be following with some of the qualitative observations that we have found.
I'm going to be providing a brief presentation on some data characteristics or demographic characteristics of Hispanics in agriculture. There will be 4 specific indicators that we're going to talk about: population change, Hispanics in the occupation sector, education certificates awarded, as well as farmers and operators, as Nola mentioned, from USDA. So we're going to get started. If I can transition my slide. There we go. Let's start with population change. As you can see in this image on the right from the Pew Research Center, Hispanic population has increased steadily since 1970. Over the past 10 years alone, the Hispanic population has increased by more than 11.6 million individuals from 2010 to 2020. This 11.6 million change actually accounts for 23% population change of the Hispanic population compared to 4.3% of the non-Hispanic population. The largest increase was actually seen in North Dakota. Although the population was small there, it started at 13,000, roughly 13,000 in 2010. It increased to 33,000 just 10 years later, which is an increase of 148%. There are only 9 states that actually report a Hispanic population growth less than the United States. This means that there are 41 states in this country that had Hispanic population growth of greater than 23% over the past 10 years. The 9 states that did not grow quite as rapidly actually account for quite a large number of the Hispanic population in general. 5 of those states that you see in this brick color in the bottom right actually account for 4.4 million of the total 11.6 million change. Texas alone grew by approximately 2 million Hispanics from 2010 to 2020, and California by about 1.6 million. So the growth is not quite as rapid, but they already have a very large Hispanic population to begin with. So currently, and I say currently, this is 2020, I know we're in 2022, but currently, according to the 2020 census, about 1 in 5 individuals in the United States is Hispanic Latino, about 18.7%, and this is an increase of the 16.3% in 2010. The range in the United States of the Hispanic Latino population ranges from 1.9 in West Virginia to 47.7%, which is in New Mexico. 9 states actually have a Hispanic population proportion greater than that of the United States. The 9 is just a coincidence, has nothing to do with the 9 that we previously mentioned. New York, at the bottom of your image on the right, has a Hispanic population of 19.5%. So about 1 in 5 New Yorkers are Hispanic or Latino, all the way back up to 47.7, as we mentioned, for New Mexico. There we go. This image that I want to draw your attention to is taken from the US Census. This image depicts the most prevalent race or ethnic group by county in 2020. And as you can see, the majority of the country, still the white population, non-Hispanic, is still the predominant race or ethnic group in most counties. There are several counties you see in the Southeast where Black or African American populations are the #1 race or ethnic group in that county. And then there are several pockets of Hispanic Latinos being the #1 race or ethnic group. Puerto Rico is fully green. The southern edge of Texas, you see several counties in Florida, of course, California, New Mexico, and Washington State in the top left. So that's the most prevalent race or ethnic group. But when we talk about the second most prevalent race or ethnic group, the country looks quite different. It suddenly becomes much greener. You'll see that many states, including Oregon, Nevada, Utah, Colorado, Wyoming, Nebraska, have counties where the second most prevalent race or ethnic groups are in fact Hispanic Latinos. So the country looks quite different. So we're going to jump over into our employment and labor force participation. So we talked about wanting to talk a little bit about the Hispanics in the occupation sector. The Bureau of Labor Statistics reports on 5 broad categories, as you can see in your image on the left. In general, total, in 2021, 18% of all persons employed were actually Hispanic Latino, an increase of 14.5. And you'll see in the 5 categories for which data was reported, the participation rate of Hispanic Latinos actually increased in every single one of them. The greatest increase was seen in the natural resource construction and maintenance occupations, where in 2011, about 1 in 4 individuals employed in that sector were Hispanic Latino. Move forwards to 2021, it's about 1 in 3, so 33.4% of individuals employed in that sector are Hispanic Latino. For context, In 2021, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, the actual current population survey, reported on 594 categories and subcategories, which was up from 566 only 10 years before in 2011. Six of the aforementioned 594 subcategories or categories that for which data was reported actually have a Hispanic population participation rate in that occupation of more than 50%, with the leading one being drywall installers, ceiling tile installers, and tapers. 72.5% of individuals in that profession are Hispanic or Latino. This is followed by graders and sorters of agricultural products, roofers, painters and paper hangers, cement masons, and brick masons. All have at least 50% or more of those employed in that profession be Hispanic or Latino. This last image or table that I want to show you to discuss the occupation and the proportion of Hispanics participating in these occupations is a selection. There's some, the top ones with the greatest decrease over the past 10 years, and then some that have the greatest increase over the past 10 years. So if you see at the very top, there are 3 in blue. Those all decreased from 2011 to 2021. Hand packers and packagers, miscellaneous agricultural workers, and laundry and dry clean workers all decreased over the years. Farming and fishing and forestry occupations stayed relatively the same. It increased slightly from 43.0% in 2011 to 43.9% in 2021. And then there were 4 occupations that had a significant increase in that 10-year span. Dental assistants, first-line supervisors of housekeeping and janitorial workers, telecommunications line installers and repairs, and barbers all had a significant increase. The very bottom, interpreters and translators, that occupation title was actually not reported in 2011. In 2021, about 1 in 4 of individuals employed in this particular occupation are in fact Hispanic Latino. As you know, this symposium is offering simultaneous interpretation by Angelina Schiavone from Full Circle Interpreting. And we're very, very excited to have you here offering the service for all of us to be able to communicate and stay together. So thank you. The next indicator I want to touch on briefly is education, degrees, and certificates. We're looking at 2021 data from the National Center of Education Statistics. And according to this data, about 18% of all degrees and certificates awarded in the United States went to Hispanic and Latino students. The top 5 states in terms of proportion are Puerto Rico, not depicted in this map, Puerto Rico, New Mexico, California, Texas, and Florida. The top 5 states by total number of degrees or certificates awarded are California, Texas, Florida, New York, and Puerto Rico. One in 4 associate's degrees issued in 2021 or awarded in 2021 went to Hispanic or Latino students. Just over 264,000 students. Of the 2.2 million bachelor's degrees that were awarded this year, about 350,000 went to Hispanic Latino students, which accounts for about 15.7%. Roughly 1 in 10 doctor degrees categorized as other or master degrees went to Hispanic Latino students. And then bringing up the rear, doctor's degrees in professional practice and research scholarship came in at 9.6 and 6.4%. For this particular conference, we looked at 2 very specific degrees. We looked at agricultural degrees and degrees in natural resources and conservation. We're going to start with agricultural degrees, and as you can see on the screen, the full title of this particular degree or umbrella is Agricultural, Animal, Plant, Veterinary Science, and Related Fields. In 2021, about 50,000 degrees or certificates were awarded in this field, of which 7,300 went to Hispanic Latino students, about 14.7%. So this means approximately 1 in 7 degrees or certificates in agriculture were awarded to Hispanic or Latino students. There are actually 83 different fields of study under this agricultural umbrella. You heard Dr. Homer Wilkes discuss earlier about the various opportunities in employment and degrees awarded. Of the 83 different fields of study, the top 5 in terms of Hispanic Latino students receiving these degrees or certificates are on your screen, with the top 2 being veterinary, animal health technology or technician, and veterinary assistant degrees or certificates. Almost 2,500 awarded to Hispanic students, 28.8% of the total, followed by general animal sciences, for which about 1,100 Hispanic Latino students received a degree or certificate in this field, approximately 14.7% of the total. The final 3 bringing up the top 5 are agribusiness, agriculture, business operations, veterinary medicine, as well as general agriculture. With regard to our natural resource and conservation degrees in 2021, there were a total of 30,000 degrees awarded, of which 3,263 went to Hispanic or Latino students, about 10.7% of the total. Under this particular umbrella, there are 23 different fields of study, and the top 5 here in terms of Hispanic Latino students receiving a degree or certificate in this field are environmental science at almost 1,200, 12.7% of the total, environmental studies, just over 1,100, 11.5% of the total. And the following 3 to bring in the top 5 are natural resource conservation, general, wildlife, fish, and wildland science and management, and finally environmental and natural resources management and policy, general. Finally, we're going to touch briefly on the number of Hispanic producers. As Nolo mentioned, we use USDA Census of Agriculture. The next census is actually being taken this year, 2022, but it'll take some time for this data to be released. So we're looking at the transition and change between 2012 and 2017. You can see in the top left that the total number of producers across this 5-year period increased by 7%. Whereas the total number of Hispanic producers actually increased by 13%. When we isolate for gender, there's some interesting things that happen. Total male producers, Hispanic or non-Hispanic, actually decreased by 2% over this 5-year period, whereas the number of Hispanic male producers alone increased by 1%. Female producers increased significantly by 27% from 2012 to 2017, but the greatest increase was seen for Hispanic female producers that increased by 46% over this 5-year period. The top 3 states in terms of Hispanic producers are Texas, California, and New Mexico. Combined, they report about 68,000 Hispanic producers, which is roughly 60% of the US total. And finally, we're going to look at Hispanic and Latino farms. The total farms changed or decreased by 3% from 2012 to 2017. However, Hispanic operated farms increased by 8%. The greatest proportion of Hispanic operated farms are located in the southwestern region of the United States, as you can see in the map. There are several counties in Texas and New Mexico, the tip of Florida, where 50% or more of total farms in that particular county are operated by Hispanic or Latino operators. With that, that concludes my portion of this presentation. I appreciate and thank you for your attention. As Nolo mentioned, he's going to share with you some qualitative data, observations, and findings. These we've collected through interviews with students, farmers, and agricultural professionals over the years. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Maya. So how about going beyond the demographics and some of that data that Maya shared with you as a complement, as to reinforce what we want to eventually do, which is having successful outreach. We follow with qualitative data, actions, and interactions, and that part of our work happens in the ground. We have an opportunity to describe better Hispanic communities in agriculture across the U.S. Very different what happens in Puerto Rico versus what happens in California and New Mexico. Yet, what we want is to make sure that we are effective. So the strength, needs, educational preferences are no longer defined by the traditional demographic, age, gender, location, income, family. We want to get deeper into what we can learn to be more effective and to help. Now, as many of you know, probably the most significant change that we can identify is the change on technology. How much, for example, the use of a smartphone is involved in the agricultural production planning because of all the communications that take place and where the many of these farmers are getting the information. In terms of what we have done recently, we have finished two major studies, one of which we're going to be talking about a little later, and that has to do with landowners, specifically Hispanic forestry, forest landowners, a program that we developed because of the support of the U.S. Endowment for Forestry and Communities, and we'll talk about that. Then there was another study of the nursery industry in Louisiana, which is in the central part of the state, growing because of the presence and the management of many Hispanic producers. So recent data tell us several things, and I try to condense this information, but I think it's really critical. And I know we have professionals as well as farmers as well as general public in this symposium, so I will try to identify those that I feel are relevant and critical. We continue to see that even though we're the largest minority in the United States and we have had generations of Hispanics, many individuals in agriculture as well as in many other agencies dealing with conservation of natural resources see Hispanics as a potential and not a reality. I think that part is frustrating, not just for many Hispanics that have been doing this work for a long time, but also is reflected on the research, is reflected on even the count. The research focus that I have looked at more recently is on the cultural limitations of those that want to reach out to Hispanics, which is fascinating because in many cases, a lot of the resources are going into helping individuals that may want to understand the culture, which is important and necessary, but all the resources go there and we lose sight of a third element that we have seen, which is Hispanic leaders are not engaged. Hispanic leaders that are in agriculture, that have experience, that have success, that have strength and best practice in many cases, have not been engaged. The focus has been on that cultural limitations that these offices are having, which again, in a comprehensive approach to this is important, but it's not the one aspect that we need to be focusing on. Following the leaders not being engaged, specifically in agriculture, and I think that as a Hispanic, it could very well be that Hispanic may have to deal with the fact that we are seen as farm workers strong, which we are. But beyond that, there are a number of other strong abilities, capacities, and experiences that Hispanics bring. You'll get to hear from state conservationists speaking about climate smart and other subjects that can actually make a contribution about the U.S. agricultural strength. There's not just that little community as many may want to think. So nonprofits that serve Hispanics are not as active as they should. And as we hear from these NRCS opportunities for funding, We at mano-Y-ola would like to empower and support many nonprofits that are serving Hispanics across the United States in competing for those funds to do outreach, to do education, to develop their own cadre of outreach specialists to get to these communities where they can get better than anybody because they live there and they understand the culture. Goals and objectives still drive small farmers, in this case, Hispanic farmers. When you're looking at Hispanic farmer, their goals and objectives of their farm and the land is first and foremost most important. So independent of the size, that's what they're looking at. So many of these programs that already exist, they just have to accommodate to those goals and objectives, which are not that different in many cases for a lot of other small farmers. And the last thing that I'll share that we have learned is that things are fast changing. I mean, even think about the administration changing hands and the new initiative, the new programs, the new services. So many of these programs that many Hispanics would like to know about, they don't know because things are changing so fast. So again, as I mentioned earlier, when we focus too much on the cultural limitations of the agency, we lose sight of the fact that things are changing and we are losing opportunities to bring those that are already doing work and involved in agriculture, who are Hispanics doing quite well, that could do better and could actually get in and help other Hispanics. I also want to finish this by saying that in Louisiana, as an example, today, one of our Hispanic farmers, one of our superstars, has an official opening of her business, meaning celebration, inviting folks. After knowing and learning about some of the services and programs that she could benefit, she was able to get a processing outfit with a loan, a grant, and was able to maintain that business during COVID. And so that's an example of someone that couldn't necessarily wait for office or a county, or in this case a parish, to be culturally ready to support her. In this case, language was not a barrier, and the help that we were able to provide was essential for them to speed up the process of being able to be successful as farmers, a member of a community, which is now leading and modeling and helping others have success. So again, the data that we work with is active, is data that needs to be taken into consideration to see what can happen now. And we are very happy that we can actually every year put this in context, so you can see what's happening in Hispanic agriculture, as well as in this case, today we're starting to talk more about forestry. So I'll stop there and I will invite my colleague Maya to see if there is any question we can help you or answer at this point.
Thank you, Nolo. We did receive one question on the chat. And this was regarding the increment of Latino women in agriculture, what their work profile is, whether they're owners or what tasks. And unfortunately, the U.S. Ag Sense, or the Census of Agriculture, doesn't go into quite that much detail for our Hispanic women in agriculture. Table 58, and I can share a link here in a minute when we transition to another segment of the symposium. Table 58 does offer some detail on females in general in agriculture, but that level of detail is not available for Hispanic women. Now, because we are reporting on these women, they are in fact operators, either full or part owners. So these are not agricultural workers. They are operators of their farms. And I will share a link to the specific table for women in general.
Yeah. Okay, so you mentioned there are 83 fields of study within the broader agriculture category. Can you tell us for which are underrepresented by Hispanic students?
So yes, there are 3 specific fields that are rather underrepresented by Hispanic or Latino students. The top one is agriculture, business, and management. In 2021, there were actually 2,100 degrees and certificates awarded in this field, and only 72 went to Hispanic students. That's about 3.3%. Farm and farm ranch management was also underrepresented. 537 of those degrees and certificates went to the general student population, of which only 20 went to Hispanic students, so that's about 3.7. And the last one was agriculture, communication, and journalism. I'm always surprised when I do this data and I do this studying, because again, there are 83 fields. We're not aware of all of them, but if you're a communication or journalism major, there is actually a field to study that's related specifically to agriculture, and Hispanic students are underrepresented here as well. There are 462 degrees offered in 2021, and only 26 went to Hispanic students, about 5.6%. So I'd say those are the top 3 where we're rather underrepresented.
Yeah, thank you, Maya. There's another question. You stated that there was an 46% increase of Hispanic female operators from 2012 to 2017. How many producers are we talking about?
That's a great question. In 2012, there were almost 27,000 female producers, Hispanic producers, 26,900. And just 5 years later, that increased to almost 40,000. The actual number is 39,252. I say actual number, of course, it's census, so it's plus or minus. There's always a margin of error, but it increased by about 13,000 individuals in 5 years.